And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to this episode or iteration of Desert Live with Kristy Drutman from Brown Girl Green. As it is our custom, we want to start with so let's take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land we are on for time immemorial. For Joshua Tree, where the Desert Institute is based out of, the peoples are the Mojave, the Cahuilla, the Serrano, and the Chemehuevi. I am tuning in from Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is the land of the Pueblo people, Navajo Nation, and Jicarilla Apache. And Kristy?
Hi, everyone. I'm from the Bay Area, otherwise situated on Ohlone land.
Thank you. Hello again, everyone. My name is Gabachia. I'm your host from the Desert Institute today. This event will not be possible without the support from the Desert Institute and the Joshua Tree National Park Association. And I first want to touch on some rules for the live stream. The first one is be nice in the chat. So we love to hear from you. We love to get your questions and opinions throughout the conversation. Just be nice to each other. Definitely engage with each other. We want to enable those conversations. The questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, just to avoid confusion with possible live streaming delays where we're talking about something live and maybe you are hearing it at a different time. There's also a ask a question button on the screen. So if you can submit your questions through that, it helps us a lot at the end of the presentation to go in order and make sure that we cover all the questions from you. In case we get disconnected, do not fret. We appreciate your patience, but as we have experienced in the past, things happen, glitches happen. Go ahead and refresh your browser window. Let us know if you have any technical issues. Also throughout, we might be able to help. We've also heard that sometimes you're unable to hear the sound or the audio from the stream. If you are on the Joshua Tree website, just go up to the banner and where it says tune in, when you click there, that has really helped people in the past resolve that problem. So do that. Last but not least, donate if you're able to, share our posts on Instagram, follow us on Instagram, and support in any way that you can so that we can continue to offer these programs at in an accessible way, either free or donation-based to all. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit about Kristy. Kristy Drutman, she, her, is a digital strategist and the host of Brown Girl Green, a podcast and media series dedicated to critical conversations around building an environmentally just society. Kristy interviews environmental rights leaders and advocates about the importance of diversity and inclusion, as well as creative solutions to modern-day environmental issues. As a Filipina American, Kristy is inspired to make sustainability and the outdoors accessible to as many people as possible. And today we are super excited and honored to have Kristy as a guest in Desert Live for this Nearby Nature, making the outdoors accessible for all.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so Kristy, I'll hand it off to you. And everyone follow along, make sure you're sending in those questions, and I will see you in a few.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to do this presentation with you all. I am going to do a screen share. We practiced this beforehand, so hopefully it all pans out nicely. 1 second. I'm just going to go to the first slide because it kind of skipped ahead one moment. Okay. I'm going to click on that. Cool. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to click the preset button. It may take a second, so it's lagging a little bit. Okay, so hi everyone. This is my workshop on nearby nature, making nature more accessible in our communities. So I'm really excited to have you all here and for us to explore this topic together. There is a good amount of information, but I'm going to try to, move through it as much as possible so there's enough time for you all to ask any questions or, have any comments you want to share. So what we're going to cover today is the importance of nature in our lives, especially during these times, during quarantine, the disparities in access to nature in our communities, how communities are working to make nature more accessible, tips and resources on how you can carry out accessing nearby nature in your everyday life, and a fun exercise to get in touch with your surroundings. So who am I? So I'm Kristy Drutman, and as Gabacha introduced me as, I'm the host of Brown Girl Green, which is a podcast and a media series centered around diversity and inclusion, as well as environmental advocacy. And I am a Jewish and Filipina American, so I identify as a Jewpina, and I care a lot about making the environment and making sustainability accessible to as many people as possible. And that's what really inspired me about doing today's talk, was figuring out how we can address the issues around the inaccessibility of nature for all of our communities, and how we can start getting back in touch, especially during these times. So to begin, I wanted to do like a really quick, 1 minute mindfulness exercise. So if everyone who is listening to this, if you could just close your eyes for, right now. And we're gonna just drop in, because I know you all have probably had really busy days and you're taking your time out of this. So I want to make this experience as enjoyable as possible. So just get settled where you're at. Make sure that if your shoulders are kind of dropped up, towards your ears, to just drop them. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And if your legs are crossed, make sure you uncross them and just plant your feet firmly on the ground. What I would like you to do, as you're taking some more deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling, I want you to just imagine your favorite natural space as a kid. This could be the ocean, this could be a park or a forest, this could even be your own backyard. I just want you to take a moment to sit and think about what that special place is that made you feel really, really safe. And as you're sitting in this place, picture what you're seeing, the colors. Think about the sounds or the smells that you usually experience in that space. And just sit with that feeling for a moment. And then I'd like you to take 2 more deep breaths in. And another one. And I would love for anyone who's in the audience to type into the Crowdcast chat box on what place you just imagined in your mind while doing this mindfulness exercise, and share with each other. Cool. Well, thank you for indulging me in that exercise. I think I just really wanted to bring it up because when we're thinking about nature and the outdoors, we have to actually understand, what does that mean to us? And all of us have our own context and our own relationship to the outdoors. And so the first step to actually reconnecting with nearby nature is understanding what your relationship with it is in the first place. And usually it's the place that makes you feel the safest, where you really feel connected to your surroundings. So yeah, I mean, all of you probably pictured a space that meant a lot to you or had some dear memories, and that is to feed into this narrative or this belief that I have. And, you know, I believe is a universal principle that nature is a human right. Humans love and crave nature, and we thrive in nature. This photo is taken in the Philippines, a place that, you know, I hold dearly in my heart because of the natural landscapes and connection to the land I was able to have there. And so I hope that, you know, when we're thinking about nature, it should not be a nice to have. It is a human right that everyone should have access to. And yeah, some of the benefits of accessing nature, I'm sure many people here know this, but just a recap. Nature gives us stress relief. It provides health and wellness, mental health support. It reduces urban heat islands, which is basically just, you know, areas in a city that just end up getting super overheated due to, you know, the amount of concrete and asphalt in the area. There's not enough, you know, nature around to absorb that heat. And then it also improves our connection with the natural environment. And this diagram is a really nice summary of just explaining like the health benefits in our communities by accessing nature. So yeah, you can check that out. And, you know, with all of the access to nature and the amazing benefits we get out of it, we have to think about the people who can't access nature. And because, you know, like I said before, nature is a human right, and it has all these amazing benefits to make people less stressed out, to make them healthier. And even during, you know, COVID, there's all these like studies and reports coming out that majority of people, because they can't, you know, go out places or recreate, that like their main form of leisure and enjoyment right now is going, you know, to a local place of nature. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case for everyone in every neighborhood. And so I wanted to explore that. So this is a map of Los Angeles County. And basically what this diagram is trying to show is the need for parks in Los Angeles County. So you can see here, based on the diagram, that there's areas right in the center there that show anywhere between high and very high need for parks. And typically those are the areas that are deep in like the inner city in Los Angeles, where some of the poorest communities and communities of color live. And, you know, this is a needs assessment to show like the city that there needs to be more equity around how parks are being created and distributed for, you know, local marginalized communities. And so you can see that like as you go further out and there's more access to, you know, forests and trees, that's typically in more affluent neighborhoods and parts of Los Angeles that are out of, you know, on the outskirts of the actual, you know, inner city. And then this diagram's a little blurry. I apologize. I wanted to get, you know, a higher resolution option, but basically this is another diagram, and this is Chicago. So it shows here that Chicago's dog parks are in mostly white neighborhoods. So you can see here that based on this diagram, like the percentage of people of color are, you know, the dark blue area, and then the light blue area is like where there's, you know, a much significantly less percentage of people of color. And so you can see there that like even access to having the leisure to walking your dog and having walkway paths is very skewed. And this is a diagram created by City Lab, and the source was the US Census. So yeah, I mean, throwing another academic study at you all, green space is not accessible or equally distributed across the country. It is divided and distributed along socioeconomic/class lines, which are basically like the same thing, but just wanted to say in case, you know, folks might not know what socioeconomic necessarily means. But yeah, I wanted to bring up a study that was conducted in 2019 by the University of British Columbia, which was a study that was published in the Journal of Landscape and Urban Planning, to show which neighborhoods across the United States have access to mixed and woody areas. And so this is like mixed vegetation, forests, etc. And in their study, they found that there was large correlations between communities with higher incomes and access to higher education having larger access to green space compared to communities who have lower income backgrounds and did not have access to higher education. So they represented in the study that there was a huge cleavage between neighborhoods who could access green space and who couldn't. And in this study, race did not play as big of like a very like direct role in this specific study, but it was considered in the study a determining factor in access to green space, as race, was considered a factor in also determining and deciding if people had access to wealth or education. And so, what this study is showing us is that, green space, as beautiful and amazing as it is, it's not accessible to all communities. And actually the ways in which neighborhoods are designed, depend, and there's so many factors on why neighborhoods are designed the way they are that doesn't give certain communities access and gives other communities access. But essentially at the core of it, we're seeing that not everybody across the US and across the world has equal access to getting access to nature. And so we have to think about, if certain communities are not getting access to nature, especially low-income communities and communities of color, especially during times like COVID and quarantine, where nature walks can be the only form of leisure and solace for people, then they're missing out on the health and the wellness benefits I just mentioned earlier in this presentation. And so, when we're thinking about creating future communities that are promoting health, wellness, and happiness, we have to go back to green space. So this is just building off of what I was saying, but the lack of parks and gardens for low-income communities and communities of color creates large disparities around how different people are able to connect and appreciate the natural environment. So building off of just not having access to the health and wellness benefits of having green space, also a lot of these communities and neighborhoods who don't have green space, they're going to have a totally different relationship with caring about how nature impacts them and how they interact with it and how they get to be in contact with it. And so another thing is that even if there is an attempt at building a green space in some of these low-income communities, usually they'll lack amenities, like it'll lack basketball courts or it'll lack exercise equipment, things that would actually draw a community to wanting to be in a park for a long period of time, compared to a more affluent neighborhood or zip code that could invest the resources in making a park or garden more appealing for a community. And so, if low-income communities and communities of color do not get to reap the benefits of this, then they're not able to feel safe or joyful or connected to nature like people that come from more affluent and privileged backgrounds who can, go to national parks, who do have access to green space. So I just building off of that, other barriers that marginalized communities face that don't allow them to access nature. So for people with disabilities, some hiking paths or national parks may not have disability-friendly walking paths or hiking trails. Also, the cost to just camp or have entry to a national park can be a really big cost barrier for a lot of communities. And also just buying equipment, like having backpacking equipment, buying the food, buying, all the things that go into, going out to nature can be very costly. Similar to that, having the time and the resources to travel out to a bigger green space and nature reserve, if that doesn't exist in someone's community, can be a really big barrier. And the last thing is lack of information about the safety, equipment, and resources necessary to be out in nature outside of your own neighborhood. And so all of those factors are, very extensively exclusionary which don't allow people to be in the area to experience nature the way they deserve to. So yeah, would love people to answer this in the chat box, but when we're re-envisioning urban space or places that don't necessarily have green space, how do you feel we can make nature more accessible to communities who otherwise wouldn't have access? So maybe we could just take a minute and see what folks are saying in the chat box, if anyone wants to leave anything there. And I can't see this yet because I'm still screen sharing, but you all should definitely share in the chat with each other.
It's okay. I can be your mic and read if it comes up in the chat.
Do you want to read off if anyone's commenting in the chat box?
Sure. We just got a comment from Lara that says better public transit.
Definitely. Transit is such a big factor. Like, you know, if you have to own a car, I mean, it's just so restrictive. So I totally agree with that.
Right. And Danny just mentioned more green spaces near homes. Bernard says personalized marketing information. And then Lara said, sorry, better public transit was a pre-COVID idea, which is definitely a good point to go back to.
Totally. Yeah, I think, you know, I love the idea about personalized marketing. I'll be talking about that later in the presentation, but yeah, context is everything. Being able to have access to natural space requires understanding people's context on why they might not have had access to it previously. So I really appreciate you bringing up that point. Cool. Okay. We will keep revisiting this as we go on. Thank you so much.
Sure. I just want to mention the last comment from Lauren, who said she agrees with better public transit, but also well-lit bike and walking paths to established parks. And Carolyn says, even taking kids on field trips is pre-COVID, but can do online field trips. So that could be part of a new student curriculum during COVID. Totally.
I love the comment about having more well-lit spaces. I mean, that was a big thing I found in my research when developing this presentation, is that a lot of people do not feel safe going to parks in more low-income neighborhoods because it didn't have proper street lights. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Thanks, Kristy.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for participating. That's awesome. Cool. So I wanted to get into some of the solutions that communities are trying to do, especially these communities who did not previously have green space. So there's an example in South LA. So the community in South Los Angeles partnered with the Trust for Public Land to basically look at different vacant lots and alleyways across South Los Angeles to basically do like a whole community revitalization project where they're like, you know what, there wasn't a garden here before, and there wasn't like a green space, but we're going to clean this up and try to re-envision what this space could be like. And I think examples like this are really huge because, you know, it's projected that thousands to like millions of more people are going to be moving into cities in the next century. They're appealing. It's, you know, population dense, like where people want to be, but the amount of land that's available is going to continue to decrease. And so with that being said, we have to think about neighborhoods like South Los Angeles, as I was mentioning, that don't have green space and have no other land to acquire to be able to revitalize their community. And so you have to take what you have, like this alleyway, reclaim it and turn it into something new. It requires a whole reimagination of urban space, but you know, when it's specifically led by the community to do that and to be able to get the funding and the support necessary to make it happen, is beautiful. I mean, it's incredible because the community understands their own context and they understand what solutions are necessary to get people in their area to actually want to participate and be in that green space. Another concept that, also a reimagining is this concept of rewilding. So rewilding is this idea that instead of like basically, manicuring or curating a natural space like we see in cities, like, how there's all these like people in the city that like try to make the city beautiful by manicuring, the hedges and the trees and the grass. Instead of doing that, just like letting nature run its course and just basically grow out wild. And there's been a lot of studies that, have kind of observed this on a smaller scale. And they're saying that, if we could rewild our cities, there is possibility that there could be a return of flora, fauna, or like insects and animals or little bacteria and critters that would actually feel welcome in that microbiome. And so rewilding is this concept of us basically not using our urban space to like control and conquer nature, but to be in a symbiotic relationship with nature where we're learning to build and grow our neighborhoods and towns to be in harmony with nature. And yeah, this is just a little bit more about rewilding. So yeah, it's about basically, instead of us being like, oh, you have to go out to this like big natural space or you have to like access nature these ways, like what if we bring nature back to our cities? Because, before there were cities, there was land. And in some places, obviously, like cities weren't supposed to be there. And, there may be other techniques that may need to be done there. But for the most part, a lot of cities are built on a lot of land that, has the possibility of being rewilded, I guess is the word. But yeah, it allows communities to be in proximity to wilderness instead of creating all these barriers to access that. So yeah, that's another re-envisioning. And then the last re-envisioning I wanted to bring up is communities doing what they can to green and reclaim space through local tree planting and community gardens. So basically, like when it comes to talking about communities coming together, especially during this time, we have to think about like how are we creating gardens or green space in our own little tiny contained land plots that we have either in our apartments or our homes or just our neighborhoods in general. And some beautiful examples that I've seen are community gardens and local tree planting where people have come together to say, this is our neighborhood. We want a green space. We don't have land, but let's do this on a smaller scale to make it accessible. And this example that I put is actually in my own neighborhood in Oakland. And it's by this Vietnamese restaurant, like literally down the street from my house. And basically on the left, you can see they're literally a restaurant giving out free produce right now to the community during COVID. They're growing their own food and using the ingredients to just give out to the community, which is already like, an amazing gift to give back. But also on their ledge, you can see on the right side diagram, they're growing herbs that they use in their food in a mini garden that they built themselves outside of the restaurant. They just made their own wooden planter box. And basically they're telling people that you can just grab whatever you want once it's fully grown out. And I think ideas like this are super innovative to rethink how urban space can connect people to the natural world, natural resources, and each other. And so I think especially during COVID, this is a perfect example of that despite those barriers that we're having, like nature, and even in these small ways, really reminds us that, we're not alone and that we want to build a greener world together. So yeah, these are suggestions by a think tank that I grabbed from the internet. So these aren't my words, but I just wanted to share some of the suggestions with you. Obviously, it's a lot of text, but I'll just summarize the 3 main points. Is the first point that cities or neighborhoods could do to make more green space accessible for people is like ensuring that it's community led. So make sure that like if you are trying to make a green space, incorporate the voices of the community that actually lives there. Don't just like create something that lacks amenities or doesn't think about things like streetlights or if anyone in the community could actually access it by foot. Things like that all have to go in with community input when planning that out. The second thing is just thinking about gentrification and displacement in neighborhoods. So thinking about, if you do build a green space, is that going to drive up property values? Or is that actually something where you could work with the city and the developers to actually figure out a way to make sure that like rent could stay, low for people, especially like moving forward in the times we have, like people cannot afford for their rent to go up or for building costs to go up. So there needs to be a discussion about, with green space, talking about way bigger issues around anti-displacement and affordable housing, et cetera, because they're all intertwined in where these neighborhoods are located. And the last thing is just talking about, it's basically talking about like, what is causing the disparities on why parks don't already exist in that neighborhood, and basically what is the actual strategic plans to reduce the inequities around that neighborhood and accessing that green space. So yeah, you all can read more of the details there later, but I don't want to bore you with reading really long paragraphs. But yeah, the place is called the Prevention Institute where I pulled these points. But yeah, the last 2 points are that just like what I was saying earlier is about like acquiring and reimagining and repurposing urban space. So instead of just leaving a vacant parking lot or an alleyway, instead just like actually figure out how you could turn that into a park space. So it's like you're not having to like try to buy or like grow new land. It's like you're actually just taking a space that already existed and giving it back to the community. And then the last thing is talking about a lot of the things that you all were bringing up earlier, is that we have to make sure that these parks are very safe and welcoming in the context that they're located. So I really love that someone brought up earlier that the marketing has to be personalized. This bullet point really highlights that. They say that, when you're thinking about educating people about parks and green space, you have to think like, is it written in more than one language? Is it only focused on children instead of older people? Is it catered only to families instead of just like, the people that actually live in that neighborhood? And also like, is the park designed thinking about people with disabilities who may not have access to this green space otherwise? So yeah, all of those things need to really be accounted for. And so I think when we're thinking about green space, it's not just about making the green space, it's about incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion principles in the methodology behind that, because that's the only way you're going to create like a long-term shift for nearby nature to actually be accessible to people. So yeah, okay, now I want everyone to do this exercise. So again, I can't see you, but this is going to be for the next like probably 5 minutes. So basically, I don't know where you're located, if you're on your phone or your computer, but if you would be able to either like locate in an area that's near a window where you can actually see green space, or actually go outside in your backyard, I'll give you all a minute to relocate. And if you're already in an area like I am where you can see trees out your window, you can stay right here. So I'll just give you all a minute to do that right now. And also, if you have a journal or something you could write with, that'd be really great too. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to explain what this exercise is. So I just really wanted to say that a really big part of nearby nature and understanding your context and your relationship with nature is first understanding how to be mindful and aware of your natural surroundings. What actually is around you right now? And so this is a very fundamental step to start figuring out how you'll be able to connect to nature in your neighborhood. So yeah, cool. Well, hopefully by now you're settled. But basically what I want to do, I'm going to set a timer for the next 5 minutes. I would like you to do a free write of the things that you observe in the area that you're in. And this can be things like the smell of flowers, the sound of a freeway or birds, things that you're touching, any textures that you're feeling, and things that you're just seeing. So yeah, I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and then we will reconvene. There's about a minute left. If people want to start commenting in the chat box what you're seeing and experiencing, would love for you all to start typing that in.
Kristy, if we want to, we can also invite people to come on quote unquote stage, and they can read their entries if they would like to. I'm just letting you know that that is available.
Well, if anyone wants to do that, sure.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to hop on and read some of the things that they wrote down, we can also invite you on stage for you to read what you wrote.
That'd be so cool.
That could be cool. Lara just said she sees mesquite, bird song, traffic, algae, and lizards.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I can read you what I wrote, because this is interesting. I'm just sitting at my desk, and I I don't do this often enough, where I just sit here and listen. I do sit here and watch, because let me tell you, Black Birders Week got me into getting this little guy and just spotting all the little birds out my window. But now that I mindfully sat here, I wrote, I hear birds. Some are crows, some are pigeons. I don't recognize the others, but there's a lot all around. And it smells like it recently rained. And I see the branches move through the wind, leaves swerving side to side, and the clouds rolling in. Some of the branches are trapped, tangled on the power line, which I'm concerned about.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's my 5 minutes of nature in a nutshell. If anybody else wants to share, we'll be happy to have you. You can write on the chat, or you can be shy. It's all up to you.
I hope people enjoyed it. I think it was. I think this really was an exercise that really helped me start reconnecting with nature, and like no excuses. It's like it's here always. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very simple practice that you could incorporate, even just as a weekly basis. If you were to take 5 minutes to do this every week, I feel like you will feel way more connected to the nature that's around you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah. I want to get into some other steps, but maybe if there's anyone else.
Yes, Lauren just chatted us. She says, I love this. I see lots of redwoods in my neighbors' yards and hear rustling leaves and wind chimes.
Aww,
Lorraine says, hummingbirds at my feeders, tiny antelope, ground squirrels, and black-throated sparrows at the water dish. Creosote branches moving in a light breeze.
Wow, we got poets on here.
I know, and I'm all about the creosote, so that just hits my heart. Caroline says, I have a small yard area with lots of native and other plants. I have many species of butterflies and birds. I have fence and alligator lizard, plus ants they need. Amazing what happens on a tiny plot.
Aww, I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing, everyone. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Super beautiful. All right, cool. Well, we're going to get into some other exercises you all can do to keep cultivating this practice. So, these are ways to connect with nature in your neighborhood. So, some examples are backyard birding, finding a neighborhood sit spot, or earthing, which I'll talk about what that is, in a local park or even on a random patch of grass in your neighborhood. Some other examples are flora and fauna identification during a daily or weekly quarantine walk, depending on your capacity. You can also hug a tree or deeply smell some flowers on your walk. And then lastly, you can make a picnic at a park for you or your friends, which would be really nice. And these are 3 examples. And then the last point I had is, if you have the means, the money, time, and resources, even if it's just like a day trip once a month, if you do have a car or you're able to get somewhere that's a bit further away to get to more nature or green space, always a game changer. But if you don't have access, these are really great, substantial ways that you can also connect. And then within your own household, so let's say you don't even want to leave your house. I have some friends who don't even want to do that. You can buy some plants for your house. You can start a garden, even if it's only small, like on a ledge or inside your home. That's like an example of like basically a tomato plant that's being grown inside. And the last thing is purchasing some essential oils online, or have some sort of natural object, a rock, shell, or leaf to keep with you. So I really like essential oils. I think it was like one of the ways that I have been able to connect to nature in a really accessible way, because I think about the herbs or the story on like how this essential oil was able to be made, and it like calms me down. And I think having access to herbs and plants in that way is very valuable. So now I'm going to get into just a few of the examples of this that I think are my favorite ones. So the first one is earthing. So it's kind of weird at first, not going to lie. I thought it was weird when I first learned about it, but it actually feels really awesome. So you find a patch of grass or dirt, as long as you don't have like allergies. And like obviously it's a clean space, no like broken glass and stuff. You take your shoes off barefooted, and then you stand there for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how much time you have, feeling the earth under your toes. And there's like a lot of studies that are showing that earthing is really beneficial for relaxation, reconnecting, and regrounding. And it's something super simple where you're basically placing your feet on the ground in a quote unquote natural setting. And it just allows you to actually feel the earth under you. And even the process of feeling the earth under you, even for a moment, can help you calm down a lot. So the next thing that is more my thing is finding a sit spot. So a sit spot is basically just a safe place that makes you feel calm and supported. So it's a place that like you walk, like, I don't know, every time you go on a quarantine walk, etc. And it's a place that like you sit and you observe like your environment and the world around you. And the point of a sit spot is to show you that like you don't need to be in some large expansive forest to enjoy the outdoors. You can find a local park, a stream, or even a bench in your own neighborhood that makes you feel comfortable. And my recommendation is that you go to your sit spot at least once a day or once a week if possible. But when you're there, like, do not be on your phone. Do not like let all your thoughts distract you. Like, actually just like take deep breaths, relax your body, and observe nature around you. Like, I recommend it being a full distraction-free moment. And if you feel like you don't have time for that, then like you need to like either say no to some other things in your life or like do it once a week and like make it your own time, because it's really, I don't know, it's the only thing that's been able to get me through quarantine, to be honest. So highly recommend it. And then last thing is backyard birding. Oh no, this isn't the last thing, but it's the second to last thing. So I have some resources I list at the end of this presentation about how to make your own DIY backyard bird feeder. I'm a birder, and I discovered birding mainly through my own city and my own town, because I learned how easy it is and how accessible it is as a way to connect with nature, because there's so many birds outside your house, in your neighborhood, that you can observe and keep track of. And it's something as simple as like, if they look really far away, you can even just write down the basic characteristics of what you're saying, like gray head, gray wings, yellow belly, like narrow beak. And then you can go on Google search or even the National Audubon Society and just type in the search. You can also look up like your local birds. Like you can actually look on Wikipedia to find the birds that are probably in your region. So you can actually like see what are the common household birds in my city or my region. So like if you see one that looks like it, you're like, oh, I already know what that is. And then, you can keep track of your neighborhood bird roster and keep building on observations of what you hear and see. And honestly, backyard birding is one of like my favorite things, because it's something that I don't know, makes my quarantine walks so much more fun, and it allows me to like feel very knowledgeable about birds. So I love birding. And the last thing is weed and flower identification. So another thing that happens even in like the most urbanized areas is you see little weeds growing from the cracks in the sidewalk or the asphalt. And even those weeds, even though they're viewed as invasive, like even they are part of, as a reminder that we live in a natural ecosystem that's been built over by urbanization. And doing more weed identification can actually be pretty fun. Weeds are always hated on, but there's a lot of guides online that actually like can teach you about what the weeds are, what they do. And then also with flowers, same thing. Like you can look up flowers in your neighborhood and figure that out. If you live in a more remote area, I mean, I'm no professional about this, but I know people that do backyard foraging. So you could find weeds or things like that and actually forage them and turn them into teas and food. If you live in a city, I wouldn't really recommend that because you don't know what kind of pollution and weird stuff has gone into it. But if you live in a more remote area or can get to something like that, there's a lot of resources online around neighborhood foraging, actually, which is its whole own category that I don't know much about, but there's a lot of backyard foragers out there. And then I just wanted to leave you with questions for self-reflection, and we'll be sending out this presentation later so you can read these later on your future nature walks. But yeah, I want you to try to notice something new every single time you visit your sit spot or you go to like a local neighborhood park. Try to notice something new, like are there new flowers blooming? Do you smell the scents of trees in the distance? Are there squirrels that are more playful than usual? Like being able to be not only mindful of the surroundings, but also actually focusing on keeping track consistently of how a space changes just builds your relationship. It's like kind of like building a friendship with someone. You're starting to learn what they like, what they don't like, what they look like, who they're connected to, and you just deepen that relationship. So it's not just about going to look at something green. It's about learning every aspect of that. So even if it's a local neighborhood park right down the street from your house, like try to learn stuff about it and see what kind of relationship you can have with it. And the last thing is, what is one thought or feeling in your body that you'd like to feel more of to relax and be present? A big part of why we struggle so much to connect with nature is that it's viewed as like this, I don't know, for some people it's like this mundane thing where it's like, oh no, like I need to just like be on my phone, I need to rush. And nature is supposed to be this reminder to slow down even when we don't want to. And I recommend when you're in that space of building a relationship with nature to not treat it as this go thing, but actually like being present with what's around you. So yeah, and then very, very quickly, how to safely access nature. So if you're going to do nearby nature and you have access to it, please wear a mask, practice some proper distancing, go on your quarantine walks during less busy times to avoid crowds. And if you do decide to travel to a park or conserve natural space, please be considerate of the communities who are local or indigenous to that area, and whether your visit could be beneficial or harmful to their land. And then you all can look at this later, but I left you all with some resources on, like a park locator, eBird, nature activities you can do in your own neighborhood, and learning more academic research about closing the gap around green space. So thank you so much. This is how you all can stay in touch with me. I'm Brown Girl Green on social media, Kristy Drutman on LinkedIn. And if you ever want to collaborate or have me do more talks, you can check out browngirlgreenshow@gmail.com. And I guess I will exit this screen share. Let me do that. Cool.
Thank you so much, Kristy. That was fabulous. And I hope everyone got some good tips on deepening their relationship with their nearby nature from this. Is there anything else that you want to add before we dive into the questions? We have just a couple.
Yeah, I guess the last thing is just that, I went through a lot of topics today, but I just want you to know that, there's no perfect way of doing this. It's just about being mindful. And that's the whole point about nearby nature and making it accessible. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be about, embracing your surroundings and embracing yourself. It's about loving yourself, honestly, when it comes down to it. And loving yourself is loving nature. And I think everyone deserves the right to have access to the pleasure that comes from that.
I thank you so much for that. I also really appreciate you giving us the reminder that nature is there to help us slow down, and to find that meaningful connection to it when we're there, rather than I think especially with our culture and, for example, my generation, the millennial generation, we are a lot about experiencing nature through a photograph where we go pose in nature, which doesn't mean that we're not reaping the benefits of it while being there, but what's the value of a photograph if you didn't take 5 minutes to just be there with it, right? So I think this is a great reminder of, is it worth it an hour to take a photo in front of an arch or in front of a specific feature, or is it better to spend a whole hour in an area where maybe nature is more simplistic to a lens, but where you can actually have a whole meditation with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let me dive into the questions here. Well, this is not much of a question, but a topic. Lara brought up about rewilding our spaces, that we need education, that she used to do restoration sites and they had to trim them as people were very worried about criminals hiding in the brush growth or about snakes. So she thinks people are much more open to gardens with edges than they are to rewilding, at least right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like it's a complicated topic. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, yeah, people need education, but it's also like who's providing access to that education. Like, I feel like there's those things of like, if people had more access to green space and there was more programs in place that were, you know, funded and supported to like be able to educate people about how to take care of, you know, plants in the way that needs to, you know, be cared for during rewilding. I think it'll be interesting to see like this next generation of like younger people, if rewilding does become a thing, for them to have a whole different relationship to nature in cities compared to, you know, those of us who grew up in cities and didn't have as much access to that.
Absolutely. And Lara just asked, you know, she's like, forget about my comment about education. I was feeling a bit negative, but I'm actually really happy that you brought it up, Lara, because I think it helps us put into perspective the fact that none of these issues are isolated from each other. Like we're talking about education, we're talking about crime rates, and we're talking about accessibility, and all those things are somehow connected. And there's not one path in which we can just address natural spaces for all without addressing what's the crime like in my neighborhood, and what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we can address what, you know, how can we prioritize so that we can address all of the issues that we're facing as communities these days.
Totally.
And then Carolyn just said that when she did property management in crime-prone area, tenants often wanted lower limbs cut of trees and shrubs cut away or removed because they had criminals hiding in there. So again, you know, it comes back to, it's all interconnected, and we cannot look at one thing without looking at the other. So thanks for bringing that up. And then I submitted a question when I was doing a test on my phone to see how the live was looking on the other end. So my question to you, Kristy, is whether you know of any initiatives that are addressing the inequalities in urban planning around class and green spaces in particular, whether at a local level somewhere, nationally, or globally.
Yeah, so I actually included it in my last slide as a resource, but it's called Cities Connecting Children to Nature. So it's a nationwide initiative of local leaders across the United States who are basically making a commitment to try to bridge the gap of outdoor education for low-income communities and communities of color. How that's going to look now with COVID, I'm not sure. But I know that like initiatives like that do exist. And then I would say that like, yeah, I don't know. I have also seen like really brilliant videos by Save SF Bay recently. It was like Save SF Bay Area. They're also like a great organization. They're posting all these videos about how to embrace nearby nature, actually, which also was like part of my research when I was putting together this presentation. So I recommend checking out their stuff on social media too.
Thank you. Are they on your resource list too?
I will add add them. I honestly should add them. But then also the last thing as a resource that's also on the resource list is ParkRx. So there's physicians across the country who are prescribing parks as a way for people to deal with health issues. And so they made a website called ParkRx where you can actually find local parks in your area to like go connect with. So
cool. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? I think that's you done with that? Well, I think that covers all the questions. Kristy, thank you so much for this presentation and for making it interactive and actually getting us outside and paying attention and being mindful and present in this moment. So that was very special. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and everyone who joined us today, the replay is going to be available on the same webpage where the live is, so joshuatree.org/live. It'll be there for a couple of days until we load our next event. If you are able to donate, your donations really help us cover stipends for our guests and just the overhead of this programming. If you cannot donate, you can follow Desert Institute on Instagram. We just opened an account, so I'm going to type it in the chat if you're there. It helps a lot to get a follow so that we can connect with you there, and also so that you can share all the event flyers that we're going to be posting for what's coming up next. So that's at JT Desert Institute, and I'm putting it in the chat for you. Upcoming events that we have next Friday is the last event from our history series with Julia Sisek. It's about the golden era of Desert Magazine. It should be super interesting. It's going to bring back some of the topics that we've covered with her in the past couple of weeks, like Mary Beale and the homesteads. And we have upcoming after that a tour and tell with David Catching, who's the owner of Rancho de la Luna, a music recording studio in Joshua Tree. He has all sorts of fun rockstar stories that he's going to be sharing with us, and he's going to take us around his property that's full of interesting desert and elsewhere finds. And then after that, we're putting together a panel on why leave no trace, and we want it to be a panel and community conversation. So it's going to be quite interactive, kind of like today, where we really are looking to get input from the audience that joins us for the day. And from that why leave no trace panel, we also are going to be creating some sort of resource PDF that we can then distribute freely for everyone to be able to access it and learn more about Leave No Trace and why yes and why not. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you here next Friday. Stay tuned for more live interviews on Instagram. You can, if you missed it, we also did a live interview on Instagram with Kristy, and that's through the Joshua Tree National Park Association Instagram. So that's JTNPA, and you can watch also the interview that we did with Julia. They were fabulous conversations, so I highly recommend it. Thank you again for everyone who joined us today, and everyone who's going to watch the replay. Kristy, for being here and just making us better and more connected to nature. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.